So here we are again, another video. And every now and then you guys help us out with an idea for a video. In this week's video, I'm going to be talking about back button focusing. Now, if you don't know what that is, I'll explain it and show you how I use it, why I would use it, and why, if you're not using it right now, you may want to. So we got this comment from Robert Richardson, and he wanted to know about back button focusing because in our last video, I mentioned that I had the camera set that way, and when I handed it off to Eric, he doesn't really use it on his Canon camera, and I've had my Nikon set up like this for years and years, and it's the only way I shoot. So he asked, "Great video, Bill. You mentioned back button focus in this one. I've recently started using this myself, but living in the UK, I haven't been to Disney to try this out properly yet. Could you do a video on this and why and how you use it? Thanks." So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Let me explain how your camera works, like straight out of the box, the way it comes set from the factory. Your shutter button, when you press it halfway down, it's going to focus on whatever your subject is. And if you have it set to single point autofocus, once it locks focus, that's where the focus is set. If you move the camera, now you've changed the focal plane, it's going to be out of focus. So when you do that, you want to take the picture without moving the camera, and hopefully you have a static subject that's not going to move also. You could use this in landscape photography, a portrait if someone's in the, staying in the same spot. So you take your shot. Okay, now you've released the shutter, and what happens is the camera now is going to reacquire focus. So now you have to, let's say you're shooting a person and you have to regain the focus that you want. You have to put your spot on where you want it, or the camera has to try to find what you're wanting to focus on. Now, you can also set the camera in continuous mode, which eliminates that problem. What it does is, it's different cameras have different modes for it. Like I think it's called AE Servo in Canon cameras. In the Nikons, it's continuous autofocus. So basically, when you press the shutter button halfway down and you're, lock onto a subject, as that subject moves, if you keep the focus point on them, the camera is going to continually focus. So if someone gets closer to you or further away or whatever it is, if you're tracking animals or in sports, or if you're just taking a picture of a subject that's not perfectly still, the camera will continually try to grab autofocus and hold on to it. And it'll keep readjusting as the subject moves. Then you take your shot, and what happens is the camera will then grab it again. So if you're shooting in sports and you want to use rapid fire, every time you press the shutter, the camera takes the shot, regains autofocus, and has to take another shot. So if you're wanting to get like 12, 15 frames per second, if you're shooting in this mode continuous, the camera has to refocus in between each one of those shots, and it does slow the camera down a little bit. So there's a setting in the camera where you can separate these two functions. This can become your shutter release, and then you use a button on the back of the camera here. And on my Nikon, it's called the AF on button. You can program these buttons to do almost anything you want. Each button on the camera, there's function buttons here, there's buttons all over the back of the camera. You can reassign the function of all of these buttons, but this one happens to fall perfectly. Now, if you look at that, that's where my, let me block my head. So that's where my thumb would sit, right on that. So that's where I would hold it like that, and it's very easy. So I have everything separated. So this is to take the shot, this is to focus. Why would you want to do this? So basically, the way I use this is I leave my camera in continuous autofocus all of the time. I'd never take it out of that. So I don't have to worry about the different focus modes and things like that. So if I'm shooting a static subject, what I'll do is I'll press down the autofocus button on the back of the camera, and it will continually autofocus. But once I'm where I want to be, I take my finger off it, and that focal plane is locked, just like in single shot. So this is great if you're taking a portrait. If you want to grab focus and recompose, you can do that. If you are shooting off of a tripod at night, I use this all of the time. So if I'm taking a picture of a landscape or a building, or whatever it is that I'm taking a picture of, if I'm on a tripod, I can use the autofocus to get a really, precise focus and then take my finger off it. And if I'm going to take multiple shots in that position, or if I'm going to bracket my images, I don't have to worry about it. Unless the camera moves or the subject moves, it's going to be in focus. Now, let's say I was taking a picture of a person and I did that, and then they did move. All I have to do is then repress that button, and the camera is going to start grabbing focus on that moving subject. So without having to go into your menus and switch between single shot and the servo or the continuous focus modes, the camera's always set that way. When you start using this for the first time, it's going to feel very awkward. So you're used to using, you look through the camera and you could grab your focus halfway down and then you take the shot. You're separating that out. So now your thumb becomes your autofocus, and you have to get used to and train yourself to do this. But I would say give yourself even a few days and it becomes second nature. And then you're going to say to yourself, Bill was right. Why haven't I been doing this? Why haven't I been shooting like this all along? This is great for shooting sports. When I was down in Florida, I've shown these pictures before. In the last video I showed them, but I was using continuous autofocus with these birds flying around on the beach, but my daughter was also with me and I was taking pictures of her. And I could quickly go from, trying to track these birds around to, taking a picture of a static subject where I can just lock focus on her and take the shot. And you can do that very easily with this. It's one less thing you have to think about. If you can simplify your photography without having to dig around in menus, and these menus get very complicated now because there's a lot of features inside these cameras, it just makes it easier when there's one less thing you have to worry about. So I'm going to show you where this is on my Nikon camera and show you how you can really customize these cameras. Now, I know this is not the best way to do this, but I want to do it quickly so I can show you. You go into Controls, and then under Custom Controls. Okay, so now it's showing you now if you look right here on the camera, that's showing you the front function button and how I have it set. So what's going to happen here is I can move this around. Okay, so this is the autofocus on button. Now that's what I want to set to autofocus. So that button is right here. You see where my thumb is? The autofocus on button. Okay, so if we look in that menu, these are all of the different things that I could set to that. I could do autofocus lock, exposure lock, so these are all the different settings that I can apply to that button. And maybe this wasn't the best way to do this, but all I wanted to do is have the autofocus on, and that's how it's set. So this is you go into your settings, and as you can see, there's a lot of different buttons, and I can customize them all. If you have the special lenses, there's buttons all over the place on this camera, so there's a lot of choice. If you shoot with this already, I'd love to know how you use it. I was going to try to show you, actually going out and shooting with it, but it's hard to, to show. Basically, all I'm going to show you are in focus images because it's very easy to, both of these modes work is what I'm trying to say. So there's not a right or a wrong way. This is my preference. It makes life easier. I find that I don't have to mess around in my settings as much. And now that with these cameras, they have even more focus modes. So that's just the continuous part of it is one less thing that I have to worry about. Now I can worry about if I want to use subject tracking, or if I want to use the eye detect, or I want to use single point, or do I want to use wide eye detect. There's a lot of different settings in these cameras now. So this makes it easier to use those. And it works great because when I'm using an eye tracking or subject tracking or whatever it is, I just keep my finger on that autofocus button in the back, and I know everything's in focus. It's always focusing. And then when I'm ready, I just take the picture, and it's a separate function. It's always autofocusing, and then I'm just taking the picture. How do you use this? Do you use this? Why wouldn't you use this? I'd love for you guys to comment in there. This is something that I've been using for so long, I don't think about it anymore. And as the cameras have gotten better and better, I wonder if I need to use it as much. It's just, this is the way I shoot now. I'm wondering if these autofocus modes on my Nikon Z6 II here would compensate now. With a DSLR, I didn't have as many choices. With these cameras, there's so many different focus modes. So I haven't really messed around with not using back button autofocus, but it's something that I definitely think you should give a try if you haven't, tried it yet. Okay, I hope I explained that, and if I didn't, I'm sorry. I tried to kind of give you an idea of how and why I use it, but really, all it does is just separate your autofocus from your shutter button. And if you leave it in continuous mode, it makes it very easy to either lock focus and take your shots, and very easy to quickly be back in continuous mode and subject track without having to get into any menus or anything like that. My next video, I think I'm going to be in Virginia, and I think I'm going to be in Shenandoah National Park, and I think I'm going to try to make a video of that experience, kind of like a vlog. Not 100% sure yet. I don't know how the weather's going to be. It's supposed to be lousy weather, but we'll see what happens. I'm really looking forward to shooting with the Nikon Z6 II and getting out into nature and shooting at night, maybe some stars. I really don't know what I'm going to see, so I'm looking forward to it. Okay, I will see you in the next video.